Please welcome the President of the Bank of America Foundation and Mentor Board member, Carrie Sullivan.
One more time, we're gonna celebrate. Oh yeah, all right, don't stop the dancing. One more time, we're gonna...
Where's there a bathroom close by? Sweet, thank you.
It's really great to be here, and I have to say this is my 10th mentoring summit, so I'm very excited. So my name is Carrie Sullivan. I lead the Bank of America Charitable Foundation, but I'm probably most proud to be a board member of Mentor. And my role today is to really share a few highlights over the last 10 years, because we've been on quite a journey. So in 2011, I'll fast forward quickly, Mentor went out with the hosted the first summit, but went out with a mentoring challenge. And it was a small but mighty call to action. And your voices were heard. Fast forward today, mentoring is now a full-fledged movement. And thanks to all of you in the room, the mentoring movement is real, and the work continues, led by Mentor, its affiliates, nonprofit direct service providers, and volunteers. And I have to say, all of this is made possible by funding and collaboration with many corporations, foundations, and government support. So, it really takes a village, but thanks to all of you. So let's take a quick look back and see how much this movement has actually grown. Back in 2011, when the Mentoring Summit launched, there were 300 participants. 2 corporations were involved, and Bank of America was one of them. And I have to say, Michelle Obama was there to champion this important cause. So that was really an exciting time for us. Now, fast forward to today, there are 25 full-fledged mentoring affiliates here, 17 corporate sponsors, 63 members of National Corporate Mentoring Honor Roll, and approximately 60 philanthropic partners or nonprofits who are on the front lines doing the work. And the attendance is more than 1,300, so pretty astounding. So I think we all pause for a moment on the number of attendees, but also the number of affiliates have grown and the nonprofit providers that serve as the face of mentoring in large and small communities across the country are here. Your mentoring practices is where the rubber meets the road, and we know all of you share best practices, and there is great connectivity between leaders across the country around mentoring. And I know a lot of this sharing happens at this summit, and a lot of you participate in the sessions, so thank you. But to me, one of the pivotal moments for mentoring movement was the research commissioned by Mentor that really crystallized that mentoring mattered. This research really put mentoring on the map. The Mentoring Effect research was launched in 2014 and identified the mentoring gap. It underscored that only 1 in 3 deserving young people had a mentor. And this research was largely funded by AT&T and EY. There are a couple of notable points from that research. First, young people who had mentors report that they had higher education goals and were likely to attend college, more than those without mentors. So that was pretty great knowledge to know. Young adults who had mentors, particularly those at risk, were more likely to report engaging in productive and beneficial activities than youth without mentors. And young adults with a mentor were more likely to volunteer and engage in their communities. So mentoring gave everyone hope. It made people see their future. The goal of Mentor was to really close the gap and make sure that every child had a caring adult in their lives. And that work is still a huge center post and a critical piece of the movement. But we've also learned quite a bit about the differences in mentoring and that there's not a one-size-fits-all. So over the course of the past few years, we've really worked on having more mentors of color and mentors who really understood the needs of LGBTQ youth and youth with disabilities. So that has become an important piece to really meet the needs of your mentee. Corporations also recognized that mentoring mattered, and it was critical and often the secret sauce to help employees succeed. So today, when we think about diverse hiring practices at companies, and they are leveraging mentoring expertise to ensure that all new employees have a chance to grow and succeed. At Bank of America, we did a lot of work connecting mentoring themes and trainings to managers, and this work started in 2017 and has grown since then. Working alongside David and his team to build training around managers with a mentoring mindset, and also preparing our managers with volunteers with empathy training. All of this has made a difference. Lastly, additional research from Big Brothers and Big Sisters illuminates the role mentoring can play with justice-involved youth. And Mentor has really led the way with best practices with the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention through the Juvenile Mentoring Program to help youth make positive real-life decisions. And it is helping. But what is really unique about mentoring, everyone has a role to play. You can be a mentor and a mentee at the same time, and it can work. And mentoring is no longer a check the box. It is a critical path to success, and people recognize that. So I'd like to thank David for his leadership in championing this work. At a time when the needs continue to be so great in our communities, the role of mentoring is as important as ever. So thank you all for what you do. And one last note, you'll hear shortly from Omarina Cabrera, a young woman poised for success who will share her personal story of how mentoring changed her life. Omarina was at the conference speaking in 2014 and 2016, so some of you have already met her. But I was so impressed with her story and her resiliency that she has been a frequent speaker at our Student Leaders Program at Bank of America, which invests in young people across the country through early employment and leadership training. Omarina continues to be an inspirational part of our Leadership Summit, which takes place each July in DC. Omarina has challenged our student leaders to be role models, peer leaders, and to look forward to success in life, but always look back. Omarina has been an amazing role model, and I have to say, she has poise and wisdom well beyond her years. She worked last summer at the Bank of America as a summer intern for the foundation between her junior and senior year at George Washington University, which she will graduate from this spring. But what I find incredible about Omarina's story is how she is paying it forward every day. In fact, we know that young people who have mentors are more likely to do just that, and she is living proof of it. So now it is my pleasure to invite Omarina Cabrera to the stage, an impressive young woman who has changed my life as well.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Carrie, Mentor, and to all of the partners who have made this summit possible, all of the educators, and I want to give a special thank you to all of the mentors in the room right now. Encouraging a young person to realize that they matter, that they are capable, that they are seen, in the face of a world who tells us that we are too poor or too invisible, is the boldest and most powerful way to help change a life. So thank you. The first time I was asked to speak at the Mentoring Summit, I was in my sophomore year of high school, and it was the first time I heard someone put a name on the relationship Ms. Miller and I had and still have. I hadn't really heard this word mentor too much, and I felt at the time that the word mentor, or really any word, could encapsulate our relationship. Ms. Miller met me when I was 12 years old. I was homeless, and on most days, I was, for lack of a better word, careless. I mean, I was good at my studies and at school, but the only reason I showed up as much as I did was because it was warm there. Not to mention that I was a middle schooler. I was annoying. I mean, I thought I knew it all. And while that's common for preteens and teens, and all the parents are probably rolling their eyes right now, I mean, while that's common, I'm from the Bronx, where I have lost friends because they were young and they thought they, quote, knew it all. And yet somehow, beyond my circumstance, beyond my defensiveness, Ms. Miller took it upon herself to see the good in me. She took me to museums where I learned about the importance of narrative. to restaurants where I experienced other cultures, to Barnes & Nobles where for the first time in all my years of schooling, I got to own a new book. And ultimately, she took me to tour the walls of the most prestigious and rigorous high schools in the nation, schools I thought would never accept me, only to realize I would be attending one of those very schools when Mentor reached out to me for the 2014 Mentoring Summit. Thank you. That summit was the first time I got to let people in on what I thought was Miss Miller and I's secret sauce. What I later found out was called mentoring. I mean, I was really excited about it, y'all. I couldn't wait to let everyone in on this thing, the secret sauce, as I call it. But when I got to the summit in 2014, I realized there was an entire organization full of people who not only knew about the secret sauce, but was tirelessly working to make sure every child had a mentor. It dawned on me for the first time that I was not alone in this, that this was the start of a movement. I was inspired by this because it was a chance for real change based on partnership and not saviorship. Relationships were the vehicle for breaking socioeconomic barriers between communities, allowing a little Afro-Latina Bronx girl to become lifelong friends with a white woman from Virginia. But it was also a vehicle for breaking socioeconomic barriers within communities, diversifying the workplace and fighting cyclical poverty. People were mentoring not only because they should or they can, but because they care. And I became an advocate for mentoring and pushing for equal educational opportunities right then and there. I couldn't wait to be a part of this movement myself. The year after attending the 2014 summit, I was peer mentoring girls in an underground boarding school within Afghanistan called SOLA through a student-run project in my high school. I was also peer mentoring younger girls that were from Harlem, Chicago, Georgia, who came into my high school just as lost as me. And this right here is the second reason why mentoring works, because it is contagious. 6 years later, I am now a senior at the George Washington University. Thank you. And I am majoring in international affairs. And I look at this degree I will be getting in May as a testament to my hard work, my capability, my qualifications, but also as a testament to mentorship. Because one person believed in me, others began to see me and also believe in me. And I joke that I have now a squad of mentors, David included. Because one person believed in me, I now have the platform to believe and advocate for others. So thank you to Ms. Miller, and thank you to Mentor. And as I close, I hope my story can leave you with one reminder if you remember anything from what I said today. Mentorship can change children's lives in this nation, and therefore, it can help change the future of this nation. Thank you.
Please welcome back to the stage, James Anderson.
Music, I like the music. Let's keep it going. Awesome. How's everyone feeling today? I was just able to get in here last night, but I saw everybody dancing and having fun, and I think as important as this work is and how hard it is, it's awesome for us to all gather together and have some fun because it's important. I was here in 2014, and it was crazy because I was just talking to my good friend who's here with me, and I told him I can't believe it's actually been 6 years. Until we went to a Soul Cycle class yesterday, and my knees are telling me it's been 6 years. But what's beautiful is at that time, there was this grand movement happening. And I feel that mentoring was in a very unique place where we were still fighting for validation. We were still trying to fight to show how important it was in all aspects of life, with all different populations and individuals. And it's beautiful to see how much it's grown and how much people realize that this is a core and important part of all of our lives. My work in mentoring primarily focused on mentoring individuals from prison coming home. And the reason why I was introduced into this work, the reason why I have a passion for it, was because of the way mentoring played a role in my life as I grew up as a kid. I remember growing up, and I was young. I was just a little baby, cute little baby. But, you know, I always show this photo because I remind people we're all kids. We all start out as kids. And many times, a lot of different factors in our life play into what happens. And I grew up into an abusive family environment. I had an abusive father. I had an abusive mother, abusive brother. I remember coming home from elementary school and asking and praying, why do my parents not love me? What was I doing wrong? I was a straight A student. I just thought I wasn't good enough. And as time went on, things got increasingly worse. My father was always beating me. My mother hated me because she said I shared the same name as my father. And finally, my parents divorced. And I found myself living in a household with my father and my brother. And at this time, my brother became deeply involved in gangs and drugs. So my reality of coming home from school wasn't coming home to a family to have dinner. My reality of coming home from school was to be beaten half to death, was to be surrounded by the only people that I would come to know to be my family. And by the age of 14, I became deeply addicted to crystal meth that my father was giving me. And I remember I started to give up in life. And I reached a really low point where my brother had tried to commit suicide 2 months prior and failed, tried to overdose. And I remember as a 14-year-old kid, I went to the kitchen cabinet and I said, I'm not going to make the same mistake he did. I'm going to make sure that I finish the job. And I remember going in there and grabbing handful after handful. And as the hours went on, I started to grow worried and scared because I realized I had done something that could really hurt me. And at the end of the day, I was just crying out for help. And I started going in and out of consciousness and going into convulsions. I remember my father came home. And I ran to him and I said, Dad, please take me to the hospital. And I remember that he beat me and he let me fall to the ground. He said, if you want to die so bad, now you're going to have to deal with it on your own. I lived a life that was embedded in the gang life. At a young age, I started going in and out of jail. And soon, by the age of 17, after I gave up in life, I gave myself completely into this world. I found myself fighting a life sentence. And I still didn't care. I still was one of the most active gang members in the facility. And after 18 months of fighting my case, everyone said, forget about him. He's never going to change. But someone came into my life. Someone stuck around no matter what anybody said. This one lowly life that's probably going to spend the rest of his life in prison, someone wanted to fight for that. And at the lowest moment in my life, I realized that that mentor I had in my life loved me. And I didn't know what love meant, but all I knew was that this feeling I was feeling was something I never wanted to let go of. And I made a commitment to change my life no matter what it takes. I remember I had this huge passion after I changed my life to give back. I wanted to make an impact in the world. I had all this emotion and all this energy that I finally wanted to turn towards helping others that were once in my shoes. I ended up meeting a man by the name of Scott Bunnick. He's a famous producer in Hollywood that cares about people inside prisons. And it's funny, as Marina was just saying, you know, white Jewish guy, I'm like, how am I finding myself with this guy? And we ended up deciding to create an organization called the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. And we said we want to give people coming home from prison somewhere where they could come together and there could be self-mentoring. People that have been in their shoes to help guide them in this new path and this new life that they're living. When I was speaking here in 2014, we had 150 members. Now we have over 1,200 members. We've passed laws to change over 46,000 people's lives and trajectories. It's a over $7 million organization with 50 employees, most of them formerly incarcerated, including our current CEO. It was a blessing to know that changing one person's life could make such an impact in the trajectory of what they were able to accomplish. I was able to go on and be recognized by Shepard Fairey. I was able to meet President Obama. And, you know, this was a beautiful moment for me because it didn't represent just myself. It represented the people that I represent and who we are. And it goes to show that no matter where you come from, that nothing is impossible. That you can come from these difficult backgrounds and struggle, but it doesn't define who you are. It only refines you. And that your future is for you and only you alone to define and to create. I was able to graduate from UCLA with double honors. I was able to hug random camels. And most recently, this is a cute camel, right? You gotta mix a little lightheartedness into it all. I was able to hug my brother recently after coming home from 10 years and being separated. The power of mentorship and what you're able to do in other people's lives and how it begins to ripple effect through generations, through families. My brother now is a software engineer at Slack, one of the biggest tech companies in Silicon Valley. And now he's creating a coding course to teach other kids coming home from prison how to come in and become a software engineer. So, the potential is limitless in what you're able to accomplish. I recently have decided, after doing work in the nonprofit sector for a long time, I wanted to increase my impact. I had all these incredible opportunities to travel the world, to be able to work on incredible projects, and I realized I wanted to enter into the corporate world and devise a way to create a very successful business that didn't put social impact as a secondary part of its marketing strategy, but carried it in the core of who it was and what it did. This speech is as much of applauding the efforts that we're doing and understanding the importance of mentorship as it is for every individual here about taking risk in life. I remember I was just coming home from a trip from the UAE. I was invited by the United Nations to do work around economic development for women in the region. And on the way back, I saw that there was a snowstorm in Whistler, Canada, and I said, I'm going to go snowboarding. So I took off to go snowboarding, and just by chance, I ended up running into two partners that own a very large company on the mountain. We had talked maybe once before, months ago, and it was by chance that we ran into each other. The company that I'm talking about now is, you may have seen it, it's called Guayaki Yerba Mate. So it's an organic caffeinated beverage from South America, and you might say, what in the world could you possibly be doing with them now? And this goes to say that you can find a way to make impact everywhere. And you'd be surprised what's possible. For me, it's always finding people that are aligned with how crazy of a vision I have, and I was able to find that here. And so this company is a B Corp company. It kind of means that they're focused on giving back. They're focused on proper equity and diversity. And they were already doing incredible work down in South America. They're helping to regrow the rainforest, provide indigenous communities with jobs and a new life. And I said, what are we going to do here? What are we going to do across the rest of the world? And for the last 2 years since I've been on board, we decided we were going to create our own distribution company called the Yerba Mate Co. And as we created this distribution company, we had a unique opportunity to use this for good and use this to mentor individuals. We decided 2 years ago to make a commitment to hire 10,000 system-affected people across the world as we grow this company. So in my mind, I wanted to see, and I wanted the world to see, how you build a billion-dollar business while keeping mentorship and bringing people in and giving them jobs and helping them find their life now and their life after into the core fabrics of who they are. So with that, I want everyone to know that we all have one life, and we hear this all the time. Our life is limited, and we know that we can't avoid or run from death. But the time that we do have here on this planet, we have the incredible opportunity to make such great impact. And we can never forget the impact that we can make on that one life, and we can never forget the impact that we can make in our own life. Thank you.
Please welcome Dr. Wisdom Powell back to the National Mentoring Summit stage.
Good afternoon. So we've just heard a really compelling talk about justice-involved youth. And I'm going to talk to you this morning about a specific justice-involved youth that sets up the stage for what I want to say to you this morning about the importance of mentors in the lives of traumatized youth. What I want to start with is reminding us all that on June 6, 2015, Khalif Browder committed suicide following a torturous period of incarceration in New York's now infamous Rikers Island. Now, like many youth in our nation, Khalif crumbled under the tremendous weight of undertreated and possibly underdetected trauma. Now, as a trauma psychologist, I've had the privilege of hearing countless trauma stories, often from some of our nation's most honorable service members. But I have to tell you that even in all those stories, all of the stories about Vietnam, about Operation Iraqi Freedom, I have not heard a story as compelling and as troubling to me as Khalif's. And I'm haunted by his story and by his last words, "Ma, I can't take it anymore." Now, I believe that we should all be haunted by Khalif's story. We should all be haunted by his words, because they are emblematic of the ways that our children cry out in the midst of trauma and systems fail to adequately respond. And this failure to respond is something that I'm sure future generations will condemn us for. Right now, as we sit in this ballroom in our nation's capital, there is a child or youth who is experiencing a potentially traumatizing event, like cyberbullying, physical abuse, neglect, sexual assault, community violence, death at the hands of law enforcement officers. And in fact, according to recent estimates compiled by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, nearly 9 out of 1,000 children in the US on average are victims of child abuse and neglect. 1 in 4 high school students have been in at least one physical fight. And researchers estimate that each year, the number of youth requiring hospital treatment for physical assault-related injuries would likely fill every seat in 9 football stadiums. Now, we can rattle off compelling statistics affirming that traumatic events and exposures enact enduring impacts on the physical and emotional well-being of children. We know that trauma is even more impactful when it is inflicted during periods when brain development is unfolding. We even know that trauma affects racial and ethnic minority children differently. We're living in a time when we become accustomed to talking about adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. We know that ACEs accumulate disproportionately in ways that can impact the person's capacity to regulate emotional competence, that it can alter individual blueprint and impair one's immune system and response. We know that trauma can increase your risk for substance use and misuse and addiction and problems with mental health. And yet, we are still not responding in ways that are effective. We know that we are now more trauma-informed. Congratulations. But the question is, have we been holding space for the time-lagged impacts, the signs, the wounds that trauma produces? Have we been thinking about what happens after the wound infliction? When we think about wound, we're usually talking about an injury to living tissue caused by a cut, blow, or other impact, typically one in which the skin is broken. But unlike cut or broken skin, trauma creates spiritual and psychological tears in individuals' sense of safety, creates invisible and visible wounds to the minds, bodies, and spirits of our nation's most sacred resource, our children. And it's not just that these exposures are occurring in a country with a formidable military defense strategy, but that we have failed to mount an equally urgent and strategic response to childhood trauma, which I argue is an undeniable threat to our national security. There has been a structural lapse in our nation's call and response, right? So the call from our children manifests as higher rates of suicide at completion among boys and men. The upticks in suicide that we're now seeing in young black boys as young as 8 years old. Black boys like Gabriel, Rylan, and Nigel, and beautiful black girls like Mackenzie. We have socialized our children to be strong, stoic, and silent, and we wonder why they don't tell us the troubles they've seen. We ask them, "What's wrong with you? Get it together," instead of "what's happened to you?" Or more importantly, "who do you want to become?" We treat young black, brown boys and girls as adults, or worse, as superheroes. We expect them to leap over systematic dehumanization, trauma, and structural disadvantage in a single bound. We expect our children to wear what Ta-Nehisi Coates calls the wrestler's mask. But we, the guardians at the gate, the mentors who have been charged with their care, watch them sometimes, unbeknownst to us, being ground into dust, and we expect them to resurrect themselves into T'Challa. When the harsh truth is that we live in a society that places a premium on emotion suppression and on our youth being seen and not heard. We want them to keep their mouths closed and their hearts open. Our children are opening up all the time. They are telling us when they're in pain, but we need to believe them the first time. We, the mentors, the guardians at the gate, have tremendous work to do on behalf of the millions of traumatized children who come through and to us. We have to widen and mind and really bridge the deepening empathy gap. We have got to speak to the wounds. Mentors have this proximity, this power of proximity to speak to the wounds of youth. Speaking to the wounds means reminding ourselves that many traumatized children and youth devise all kinds of strategies for performing wholeness and too often suffer in silence because of shame, blame, and fear. Speaking to the wounds means actively fighting to dismantle trauma and re-traumatizing systems. Speaking to the wounds requires us to respond to trauma not with loathing and punishment, harsh punishment, but with questions like, where is the true spirit injury here? What is this behavior telling me about what this child has been through or what they have experienced? Speaking to the wound means listening with a third ear, treating the behavior as a symptom and not the condition, and responding to these with radical empathy. It requires us to hold space, holding space where healing and wound care for children can occur who are being buried alive in prisons, in neighborhoods, and schools. So mentors, what is our role? We have to be path clearers. We have to create not safe spaces, but brave spaces where youth impacted by trauma can have their voices amplified and reminded that although they may be wounded, they may someday become warriors. We failed Khalif, who, like many of our traumatized youth, just wanted to be heard, wanted to get back to baseline, to reassemble the parts of himself that got scattered and consumed in the trauma of unjust incarceration. He needed someone to say, he needed someone to see him, he needed someone to say, we see you, we know where you're from and where you're from. We failed him because we were so rigidly focused on his bounce back, his resilience, that we failed to comprehend that resilience narrative sometimes teaches our children to question the legitimacy and the depths of their wounds. Khalif died for the sins of the justice system, when what he probably needed most was for someone to say, hold on. For someone to say, hold on. Just a little while longer. Hold on, just a little while longer. Hold on, just a little while longer. Everything will be all right. And it will be. It will be all right because healing-centered mentors are in this room. It will be all right because healing-centered mentors will listen to these heart songs and encourage our children to cry, to feel, and to show up with their wounds unbandaged and exposed. I wished Khalif would have survived his trauma. I wish he'd known that we did see him. I wished that he had heard the words from Elizabeth Lesser, who teaches us that while trauma may leave us feeling broken, the truth is that these experiences may merely just be breaking us open. Every day I wake up with Khalif on my mind. I am on a mission. And I have a fire in my belly to be present and consistent in the lives of children and youth that I mentor and serve. I am telling them to hold on. I wake up and encourage them that because they have been to the depths of hell, they can rise to the heights of heaven. I know that mentors like you are providing the wound care for the many caliphs among us who are in need. And what I want to say to you today is to be encouraged by the opportunities for mentorship. May we, as Toni Morrison encourages us always, light up when our children enter the room. And when they enter the room, carrying the weight of trauma on their shoulders, may we, by the grace of our ancestors and God, offer them respite. And may we speak earnestly, fearlessly, and lovingly into their wounds. Thank you.
Please welcome Mentor CEO David Shapiro.
I'm going to ask that we do something for a second that is going to feel fairly strange for a guy who is typically very uncomfortable with silence. But I'm just going to ask that we close our eyes, open our eyes, sit in the moment for a moment. Because I think it would be an injustice after those three voices to just kind of roll on. We will roll on, and we have three incredible more voices to bring for you. But it is a lot, right? Both to sit on your shoulders and to lift you up. And when we thought back to the three voices, and we could have chosen so many who from different perspectives might be able to round out this decade of the summit and speak to us of everything from, the secret sauce, as Omarina talked about, and mentors that don't do it because they should or they can, but because they care. And a movement based on partnership, not saviorship. Her words. A movement that breaks down barriers both within communities and between communities. And James talking about how mentoring and our lives, they don't define us, we just get refined. And his life path was so powerfully his demonstration of that. And then Dr. Powell, right? Dr. Powell, maybe the most aptly named first name of a human being I've ever met, wisdom. I think we all aspire to be healing-centered mentors, right? We all know how many scars and wounds those among us bear, and that we may never know exactly what they are, but we can speak into wounds, right? We have the human power to speak into wounds, no matter if we understand where they come from and what they are. Dr. Powell talks about that as eloquently and powerfully. I think the phrase tour de force was probably made for her. And so we bring you sort of that hall of fame of speakers to speak to your experience, to represent your work, your movement. No one up here is representing anything that isn't a reality for you every day. But we only seek to honor that work with the voices of such powerful and eloquent speakers from across the country, from research and practice and various life experience. And so as we sort of shift from past speakers and sort of a hall of fame of speakers from the National Mentoring Summit, we look forward in the movement. And we bring up three special people. It's a conversation I've been looking so much forward to, and hopefully none of you guys have travel plans this afternoon because we may speak for the rest of the afternoon. But there is a clock up here, and you won't miss flights, I promise, but we could. And so I'm going to ask them to come up one by one, and then we're going to have a little bit of a conversation about where these folks see the mentoring movement going as it intersects with where they sit in the world. And again, a conversation we are having with all of you every day and will continue to, but this is representative of some vantage points we wanted to share to think about where we're going. Probably more questions than answers, but that's what I love about the humility and expertise of the folks that are coming up. So let me sit down and introduce them one by one, and I'll do my best Oprah without any giveaway. There's no giveaway underneath your seat. Maybe that's Ellen. I don't know which one that is. But let me introduce to you someone who needs no introduction. I feel like she's a rock star when you walk around here. She's probably going to win best shoes on the panel, no offense to anyone else. Dr. Tori Wieston-Cerdan, the Executive Director of the Youth Mentoring Action Network and the author of Critical Mentoring. Come on up, Tori. And next up, we have Cami Erickson from our incredible partners at LinkedIn. She's a group manager of social impact. Come on up, Cami. And last up, I love this guy's title because this is what schools do to people that make you responsible of these lofty things. Dr. Daryl Davis from the Kansas City Public Schools, a hero of mine, Assistant Superintendent, ready for this, of Equity, that's not enough, Inclusion, still not enough, and Innovation at the Kansas City Public Schools. Come on up, Dr. Davis. So, I'm going to ask them to go wherever they want in this panel, but just so you know what we were thinking, and then you'll know how quickly our plans will unravel as you listen to them speak. The thought was that we've worked with districts all over the country. Many of you have worked with districts. We have seen very little that compares to what the Kansas City Public Schools have done in terms of the scale of mentoring and the systemic interweaving of mentoring. And so as it relates to the education system, we're only simply asking Dr. Davis to represent all of education, so go for that. Cami, in many ways, and I promised her I wouldn't ask her about political advertising, although she said quickly, LinkedIn doesn't do that, so we're in good shape. But Cami, in many ways, I think, a movement that is founded on human contact, right? The role of technology, as both on one hand we're allergic to it, and on the other hand we think it's a panacea that will solve all our problems. She's going to solve all that for us. And I think thinking more broadly about networks and gaps beyond the sort of evidence-structured based mentoring, but also within that context. And then there's probably nothing that Tori can't speak to, but I think Tori, one, has this kind of incredible vantage point as researcher and practitioner, and she's sort of at every facet of the work, but I think when I first was introduced to Tori and introduced to critical mentoring, I think so many of us, and even Darielle Vasquez, I think at the congressional reception in many ways echoed so many of your sentiments about, and Marina did again, about partnership versus saviorship. I think Tori has challenged us from the beginning to think about youth voice and identity and how it is in the center of our programs. And I won't go any further than that, but it flipped the script a little bit on maybe the way we had represented mentoring, not what everyone was doing, but the way it had been thought of. So I'm going to ask Dr. Davis, maybe first off, so many folks work in schools, right? And every time we have a problem with young people, or we want to solve a problem with young people, schools will do it. Schools will do it. We got to get into schools. Why won't they let us do it? Can you tell us a little bit kind of about your journey in KCPS, how mentoring fit in, what gave you the wind behind you to get it from just like a mentoring program for 10 kids in third grade to a culture of mentoring across the district?
Yes, absolutely. I first started my own personal, I'll say, experience with mentoring when I was in college. And so I continued that as an employee with Kansas City Public Schools. I've been there over 24 years. And so I would say for a couple of decades, I run small mentoring programs, anywhere between 20 young men to 200 young men. And then in 2016, things changed when we received an invitation from the White House to join the My Brother's Keeper initiative through a program called Success Mentors. And so I went out actually came here to DC, had a chance to meet Bob Belfance from Johns Hopkins University, Haiti Chang from Attendance Works, became acquainted with Mentor Nebraska, and a host of others who were there at that summit. And so learned about the Success Mentors initiative. So bringing that back to Kansas City, launched a small pilot of just 2 schools. We probably had about 20 students in this. And the reason we bought into this is because Kansas City Public Schools, we had about 16.5% of our students were chronically absent. And so the Success Mentors program was a proven strategy to increase school attendance. And so, again, only piloted in 2 schools. And so then in the summer of 2016, the district hired a visionary superintendent. Dr. Mark Bedell was hired from Baltimore County, and he served as the MBK coordinator there as an assistant sup. And so when he came to Kansas City, we had a conversation. He really challenged me to take this further. He wanted something that was going to be bigger than anything we've seen across the nation. We set a target to have at least 50% of our students involved in the mentoring initiative, and so he basically gave me that charge, made it a priority, removed all restrictions, and within just 3 years, we have now implemented the Success Mentors program in all 33 schools. Wow. We have grown our mentoring program to not only include Success Mentors, but several other programs, and we partner with quite a few other agencies throughout the Kansas City community, and so we now have about 1/4 of our students matched to a mentor. So Kansas City Public Schools has 14,500 students. We have well over 3,000 that are paired with mentors throughout our community. So
that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
We're gonna come back to find out sort of what are some of the tipping points and what are some of the things you feel like have to be in place in other districts to get to where you guys are. Okay. Cammie, I think, you know, both technology and I sort of short-selled and workforce, right? I mean, at the end of the day, LinkedIn is very much a workforce as well as a workforce development as well as a social platform. How do you guys come at this? And I will sort of presage that by saying the honesty with which you look at your platform and its, you know, its inequities and its possible disruption, I just find uplifting and honest in a way that many other platforms are not. We'll leave it at that. Can you talk about trends and how LinkedIn is viewing this whole thing and how you find yourself at a youth mentoring conference from LinkedIn?
Yes, thank you, David, and it's so great to be here at the Mentor Summit. LinkedIn's vision is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. And so our social impact team thinks a lot about the word every, and in particular, how can we ensure that young people and job seekers have the networks and the skills that they need to succeed? And over the past year or so, we have started really digging into the data on our platform and have started to tackle what we're calling the network gap, which is the advantage that some people have over others in accessing opportunity based on who they know. And it's probably no surprise to any of you in this room that where you're born, where you go to school, and where you work have a huge impact on the economic opportunities that are open to you. And research that we've done based on LinkedIn data has shown us that if you're born in a high-income zip code, and then you go to a top university, and then you work at a top company, you actually have up to a 12 times advantage in terms of the economic opportunities that are open to you as a result. Now, of course, the inverse of that is if you're born in a low-income community and you don't go to college and then you don't end up at a top company, these networks can be, instead of a virtuous cycle that build on each other, a really vicious cycle. And what we're trying to do at LinkedIn is to really mobilize our people, our programs, and our products, ultimately, to help close these network gaps and connect young people to opportunity. So I will stop there. I'm sure you'll ask many other questions, but it's obviously challenging, and I think when it comes to technology, we really believe that technology is necessary, but it's not sufficient, and a lot of the work that we've done with Mentor and Starbucks and many other partners in the room have been focused on bringing people together in person, in real life, to make a connection, and then hoping that that connection will continue over time after that one event or on facilitated by technology, but not only through technology. And we've been really struck with many of the trends in the mentoring space over the past 10 years, but most recently the discussion about the power of weak ties and everything we know about, how much more likely you are to really find a job based on somebody you don't know really well, but who may know somebody who you know, reinforces the importance of networks, and how, in addition to making sure every young person has a mentor and a long sustained relationship with that mentor, they also need a network of adults in their community who can help inspire them and point them to opportunities.
Thanks, Cami. Sure, you could go on. We've all wrapped here, but thank you, and we'll keep going around the horn. Tori, I think, sort of like to ask you about personal and professional journey, because I'm sure, at some point, you're running a mentoring program and you're going through the academic process to become the good doctor that you are, and you're thinking, I'm finding out something that other folks need to know about. And maybe some other folks have discovered it, but they maybe haven't put words to it because I'm not finding it represented. So I wondered if you could talk about sort of like what gets you to feel like, because I'm sure a lot of people in this audience feel this way, like I got something to say that would benefit other people and I want to say it. And then also that journey of I watched as, the minute you started saying it, it was like every affiliate I talked to at Mentor was like, yeah, Tori's coming to my town the next week. Our town needs to hear what she's got to say. And just kind of like how that has gone in terms of challenging people's thinking, and just kind of that, just in a few minutes, talk about your entire professional journey, if you could.
Life.
Yeah, please.
So I would say that this journey has been full of a lot of pitfalls, but also triumphs, right? So one of the things that I like to remind folks is that some of us were doing this work before it was the cool thing to do. and that feels like a struggle, right? When you're one saying, hey, did you ever think that you should consider race, class, gender, sexuality when you're mentoring a young person? And people like, yeah, well, we just want you to spend time with them and hang out with them, maybe kick a soccer ball around, and that's what we call mentoring, right? And then sort of, saying, well, I'm going to do this anyway, and having some people look at it from a distance, and then, here we are in 2020, everyone's like, equity, critical mentoring, and I'm like, well, wow, this is awesome, right? But it's also, I just remind people, especially funders, when they say, who funded you? I say, I came to you, and a lot, on this journey, right? When a lot of folks didn't believe in it. So I just have to start by saying that, because, and that's not to be, sort of a negative Nancy, so to speak, but it's to remind folks that sometimes there are those of us, and not just me, but so many folks out there that are on the edge of something, right? That people haven't gotten hip to yet. They haven't caught on to yet. But you're doing the right work. Keep doing that work, because folks will catch up.
Yep.
And so I just wanted to be able to say
absolutely.
that. But I think a lot of how my journey really sort of came to be where it is now is just listening to young people. So I always tell people I started a mentoring program doing what I thought as a researcher were all the right things. And then young people said, nah. And then I had to have a sort of humility to say, okay, well, what does a mentoring program look like for you? What do you need from me as a mentor, right? Because I had all the book knowledge and I thought that I was doing everything right. But then young people said, no, I really needed to be more responsive. I really need to consider these things. I already have people talking to me about my grades. I already have people talking to me about my attendance. I already have people telling me to behave in school. What I need are work skills. What I need are networks. What I need is someone to help me process this trauma that I'm experiencing. What I need is for someone to tell me that really is a microaggression that I'm experiencing in class, but I don't have a word for it, right? And so listening to young people was really what my journey was. It was about stepping back, and stepping back from my adultism, right? And saying, young person, what can I do to serve you, and how can we be partners in this? And how can we create something together that works for you, right? And that's really, critical mentoring for a lot of people have, sort of made it a theory and a philosophy and all of these cool things, which I love y'all for. Thank you. But really, at the end of the day, it was about me being humble enough as an adult to listen to what young people needed and then to be responsive to that.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you, Tori. Dr. Davis, you know, we talk a lot about getting systemic. You talked about Dr. Bedell coming in. I think we know about the importance of leadership. But if we are just to rely on superintendents getting awakened to the fact that kids need relationships and they're all visionaries like Dr. Bedell, we're going to be waiting a very long time for schools to become relationship-centric places. Yes. So based on your journey as a guy who was running small mentoring programs and then you're challenged by this guy to make it systemic, yes, how would you advise us as a movement? What are the tipping point things, little things, from how it's staffed to whether it's community partnerships or it has to be run by the district? What are the things that break it out of the silo and get it to the tipping point that you've gotten it to, if that makes sense?
Yes, I do believe that schools can serve as the hub or the center of any mentoring movement in a metropolitan area. Schools can't do this work alone. I do believe that there's a great opportunity in partnerships, and so if there's educators in the room, please do not try to do it without the support of mentor, without the support of funders, without the support of community agencies who can come and say, we can assist you in this endeavor. So the success of Kansas City Public Schools mentoring program is only made possible because the entire community, the entire metropolitan area has really wrapped its arms around the school system and has bought into this mentoring mission. So having those on the inside really hold up the banner and really stress the importance of mentoring. And I believe that if we build it, those who want to be a part of the success of young people will come. I do want to say that in addition to having quality leadership, there has to be funds, put toward it. Now in Kansas City, we've put aside the funds in a budget, but if there are funders in your community that you can petition or request those funds so that you can not only provide, say, food and refreshments for those who are coming to be trained, but then also so that you can recognize your mentors. You need access to technology. We have a software through Innovative Mentoring that we utilize to manage our growing number of mentors daily. So the technology, the leadership, the funds, and then also I believe the quality of the training really makes a difference. And so, of course, in my title is equity. So through this umbrella of equity, we're really looking at how do we make the experience of young people, say, beneficial to where everyone can win. So as an educator for more than a couple of decades, I always hear these same questions. How do we close the gap between high-income and low-income students, or how do we close the gap between white and black and brown students, when the question we really should be asking is, how do we create schools where the race of the child or the income of the family really doesn't have any bearing or doesn't predict whether or not they will succeed in school. So equity is really about reducing the predictability of who succeeds and who fails in school. And so underneath that, we look at mentoring as an opportunity to make sure each and every student belongs. So mentoring is really about belonging. And when we bring in our mentors, we're really stressing that they can be the advocate, the champion. If you think about whether it's at your church, at your in-laws' home, or just anywhere, do you really feel like you belong there? It could be a basketball team where we have many students in our schools without access to supports. And so we're intentional about going after those young people, making this opportunity available to them. We send information home to parents, and so many parents have signed their children up. And so the need is there. I mentioned that we have over 3,000 that have been matched, but we also have about 700 on the waiting list. So we still have room to grow. We will not stop until every single student is off the waiting list, or every single student has the support that he or she needs to be successful in school, to thrive. So it just really takes an entire community. It takes all your internal staff, just everyone to really take a student underneath their wing and pour in that success, that support, so they can thrive.
Awesome. We're going to come back to you with results and data in a minute, because I know in God we trust, all others bring data, so I want to go with that in a minute. But Cammie, you guys had a Closing the Network Gap Summit out at LinkedIn, had many innovative nonprofits, and I think even from a product standpoint, started talking about how do we disrupt the way, a Princeton grad finds another Princeton grad. How do we invite people into each other's networks? You can go wherever you want with this, but what are some of the things you guys are thinking about how to disrupt that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think to your question about sort of how do you create systemic change, we're really thinking about how can we help to close the network gap by leveraging our people, products, and platform, but also how do we work with other organizations to bring them along? And so partnering with nonprofit organizations and other companies to figure out where there's common values and aligned goals, how can we bring complementary assets to the table? And I think that summit that we hosted in San Francisco was an amazing example of getting a really cross-functional group of people that all have a stake in closing the network gap together to start the conversation. And the mentor team did an amazing job of hosting what we call a LinkedIn Coaches session to kick off the summit, which was essentially a mentoring, event where we brought young people together with professionals for career conversations. And I think my favorite part of the summit was that many of the students who participated in that event actually stayed for the afternoon discussion. And so we had a whole room full of 170 people that were both practitioners and corporate leaders and young people. And every time we opened up the stage for questions, most of the questions came from young people in the audience who were, had a real stake in this discussion. And it totally changed the tenor of the conversation. To have them in the room, to your point, sharing with us their perspective to shape these strategies. So, we're really focused on that cross-sector collaboration at this point. I would also say that as we think about how we can change systems, we think a lot about how we leverage our unique value, and that really is our platform and our 600 million professionals who are on LinkedIn. And we are really focused on continuing to make LinkedIn a very trusted platform that puts members first, especially everything that is going on right now. And I'm really proud of the work that we're doing at LinkedIn, very humbly, to start to make sure that we are building products that have an equalizing effect to all of our members and actually don't advantage people with larger networks at the expense of people with smaller or weaker networks, because our mission really is to create economic opportunity for every member. And so we need to make sure that our products and platforms serve every member. We also have a product team that is currently working specifically on a strategy to help young people who don't have the connections they currently need to get the jobs they want and figure out how our platform can be better at facilitating connections between them and professionals in the hopes of connecting them to opportunities. So we are very much on a journey, but it is something that is a big cross-functional priority internally, and I truly believe that if we can figure out how to make our platform work better for everybody, that we can have a really impactful, game-changing impact on the lives of young people and job seekers across the world.
Yeah, well, just a little mission like that. And I think that my job is to ask questions and not editorialize, but I would say the one part of the journey we've been on that might be reflective for all of you with LinkedIn, and I think we find ourselves on this journey more and more, is when LinkedIn first came to us, it's all about, this isn't evidence-based mentoring, this isn't a conversation, none of this works, we don't have any. And instead, the conversation became what are you trying to do? What are you trying to do with connections? If you're trying to have a mentoring event where, a kid who says, I want to meet an astronaut, wants to meet an astronaut, and we can find a member on LinkedIn, why wouldn't we do that in a safe space? We have this way within mentoring of kind of ranking what is best. And of course, there are evidence-based practices, but the question to me is something that we've got to get better about proportionality. What are we trying to do with relationship? Mm-hmm. And that's been an evolution with LinkedIn to say, this is not a less than conversation, right. It's another part of the conversation.
Totally. And I think Julia Freeland-Fisher from the Christensen Institute has done amazing research on social capital. And one of the things she has found is that one-off interactions can provide, I think she calls them snippets of information, but bits of information about the world that actually are really important to helping young people navigate. And so I think, again, it's a both and.
Yeah.
But how do we create space in the mentoring field for different types of relationships that are going to serve different purposes for young people over time?
So, Tori, as you look forward, you alluded to this thing that I think is this interesting moment that happens in awakening and the claiming of wokeness, which is one of my least favorite terms to some degree, because nobody's really woke. Everybody's awakening, I think,
All the
probably. But everybody wants to be woke. Holy smokes, do they? You talked about, everybody's talking about equity now. I was doing, people were doing this work, and it's kind of like I remember My Brother's Keeper, you're talking about black male achievement now. Some of us have been thinking about that for a while. We might even have been black men, So everybody's talking about it now. What's the peril and promise that everybody's talking about it now? Where do you see it going?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm just thankful that folks are talking about it and acknowledging it and engaging in actual practice around it, right? So that is particularly important that we're still on that journey, because wokeness is a journey, right? We don't just wake up one day, it's all a process. But I think for me, and I know that this is probably an unexpected answer, but some of what I think is happening in the future for me in critical mentoring practice and mentoring practice in general has already happened in the past. And I'll explain that a little. So I was really fortunate to spend 2 weeks in Ghana this summer. And it was a beautiful, beautiful opportunity to remember. And in that process, and in that time, I really thought a lot about my mentoring praxis. And I thought about how much my natural mentoring praxis is actually as a result of my ancestry. Just something that has been passed down, something that my ancestors learned, that they taught, that I learned, that I'm now teaching. And so for me, the next level of critical mentoring is remembering. It's remembering how our communities have always done this work. It's remembering what my ancestors left, and how I can be the bridge between my ancestors and young people to continue on this journey and in this process. So it doesn't sound like innovative tech, right? but I think that that's very much a part of sort of becoming, if I can use Michelle Obama's words. But I think that's, for me, that is the next step in critical mentoring, is just really remembering at the cellular level, at the spiritual level, right? What this work is, why this work is important, and what we owe to young people.
Another moment for pause. So, Dr. Davis, I'm going to ask you to do two things, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Talk about results matter. They matter in your world every day. People are trying to claim you're a success or a failure in public schools, not paying homage to the complexity of the job you have. Yes. But tell us about how you've been able to produce and make known results. And then I think at the same time, I'll ask you, you got 1 minute totally unfairly after the results answer to say whatever you want to say to these folks, because we're almost out of time.
Okay, all right. Well, as far as data, I'll come back to the student data. I do want to acknowledge I have a great team. Ms. Sharina Clinton serves as the director of mentoring services, and we also have site coordinators in each and every school. And so through their support, we're able to track the volunteer mentor data as well. It's important that they receive a mid-year survey, an end-of-year survey. We can learn about what's working, what's not working. So that's important data that informs how we continue to improve the program and improve the experience. We've been fortunate that 90-some% of our mentors return each year, and it's because we're listening to them as to what they need and making sure we're also looking after their needs. As it relates to the students, we clearly have tracked the attendance data, because that was the reason or the catalyst as to why we launched the Success Mentors initiative. So in Kansas City, about 8.5% of students are homeless, so that's about 1,200 students are homeless. And when we looked at the homeless attendance rate, for example, out of the 1,200, 50% of the homeless population was not meeting the 90% attendance requirement. And so we knew that there was something going on there where we needed to draw attention to. But when we looked at which of those homeless students had mentors and we extracted them from the whole, we found that nearly 76% of homeless students with mentors were meeting the 90% requirement. And as we started to look across other areas, as we looked at graduation rates, so our initiative is a K-12 program format. So at the elementary, we're able to track reading levels, and we found that students with mentors in first, second, third grade are meeting their reading requirements, their reading goals at a greater rates than those without mentors. We saw that those between grades 3 through 12 have increased attendance over those that do not have the supportive mentors. Then also we looked at graduation rates. So we're looking at students who are graduating on time within 4 years. I'll give an example for MOCA, and you met some of our young men in MOCA. MOCA is Men of Color, Honor, and Ambition. It's a group mentoring program that we run in Kansas City. So of our MOCA participants, 90-some% of those young men are on track to graduate within 4 years, but when we compare that against the remainder of students in high school, we're at around 75%. So the evidence is clear, whether we're looking at grades, attendance, graduation rates, reading scores, test scores. We just have so much overwhelming data, and it has helped us to continue to go after some funding. So we've had some recent support from local foundations that see the success of that data, and so been real happy about that as well. And so again, for everyone that's out there, just keep working it, make sure you're tracking the data, show that success to any boards or any foundations that are out there, and I believe that the support will come. And you say 1 minute to wrap it up? Or was that my wrap up?
Maybe 30 seconds.
30 seconds. I would just encourage everyone to continue on this path. Mentoring does make a difference. We've seen it in the individual lives of young people in Kansas City, and we saw it through the testimonies of the young lady that's getting ready to graduate here from George Washington University. Just keep doing what you're doing, and you're making a difference. And thank you for all of your work nationwide.
Thank you, Dr. So these people will give us grace, and they'll leave if they have to make their flights. But you guys each take I know it's red there, but you each take a minute and sort of wrap us up in whatever way you'd like.
Okay, great. I think in closing, I would say, there's a lot of talk right now in the workforce development space about the importance of skills and skill building. And obviously, I think it's crucial that we work to equip young people, especially with the skills they need to get the jobs that they want and prepare them for the future. But what I do think is missing from the conversation is a discussion about the roles that networks play. And so in closing, I would say, as we think about economic opportunity and how we prepare young people, I think it's important that alongside of skills, we really talk about relationships and networks and the important interplay between these two, because upskilling is not going to be enough. And all the data that we're seeing on LinkedIn is that you're much more likely to get a job if you get referred by somebody who works at the company. And for that reason and many, many, many others, I think we really need to continue to invest and raise the flag on mentoring and networking and this part of the work.
Thanks so much, Cammie. Bring us home, Tori, bring us home.
Yes. So I would just say we need to all learn to embrace our role as elders. And I know that for some folks, that feels a little ageist. And I'm good with that, actually, because I'm only 37, but I'm learning to embrace my role as an elder and recognize that it's my responsibility to do my own work first so that I can show up in spaces and support young people in the way they need to be supported.
Absolutely. Wow. So if you could join me in just giving this panel one last round of applause, and thank you guys so much. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I'm going to close this down, so if you guys want to get back. You guys can go off, or you can stay, whatever you want to do. You can hang out while I close this down. I would love you guys with me. Thank you. Be less lonely up here. Yeah, I'm just gonna close this up. I I will tell you that I'm proudly wearing a Brothers at Bard tie that Darielle gave me. I don't usually like to wear a tie on the last day. It's one of the great liberations for me. But I wear this tie with pride that he allowed me to be an honorary Brother at Bard. So I just wanted to point that out and thank him. And if that doesn't speak to kind of like the privilege of belonging to something, I don't know what does, right? It feels pretty special when somebody invites you into anything, and that's what you guys do, is help invite people into each other's lives. And for that, we are eternally grateful. I want to give a couple pieces of gratitude to folks, and I hope you'll be, I know you're at the end here, but I hope you'll be louder than you've been the whole time, because I want to thank the Marriott crew. I don't know how many folks are out or if they want to come out. But, I can't tell you how many folks who work here come up to us and tell us that it feels like a privilege to work on this event because of the work that you all do. And I think that shows, and it's our privilege to be with all of them. And I know we all feel fortunate to be taken such good care of and know what a privilege it is. So we appreciate them. And then our team. We have Jen and Sapphire Events who are a part of our team really the whole year. But our entire staff works on this event, and it's reflective of what we work on every year. And they're always very nice to me. They'll say, like, you know, great job up there or whatever. And I'm like, I'm not really doing anything. You guys are making everything go. I just got to string sentences together. So I would love to give a round of applause to our team who makes everything go on the event. And then I think we're going to put up the date of next year's event, so you will know. And so you can get that in your calendars now. Half of you who were here this year were here last year, which is pretty cool, 50% retention. So many people, I had a person talk to me about that they met their spouse at this conference 5 years ago, so I don't know what that's a plug for. I had no ready response for that. I've never expected that. And then this morning, Mary Ellen from Cobb County Mentors told me last night she was dancing with, I think, someone from Singapore on one side and someone from New Zealand from the other. And I thought that was a pretty cool story of mentoring, bringing people together. But we are so grateful to be with all of you. I hope that you feel lifted up. I know that the days ahead will all not be easy. I know that the voices that are loudest right now, or that are lifted up the most right now, do not always feel resonant with the work that you are doing to bring people together. I can only say to you what I try to say to myself, other than deep breaths, which is our work is a positive counterforce to those voices that you may be hearing. Our voice is a positive affirmation of common humanity. Our voice is an affirmation of the potential of this incredibly multi-ethnic, diverse nation whose history is so riddled with injustices, but also the opportunity to make them right, and the opportunity to reflect what an incredibly dynamic and inclusive group of human beings can do when we are honest about where we've been, where we sit, and where we have the potential to go. You build those bridges to the future. You build them by investing in young people, and you build them by showing us what's possible when we're invested in one another and believe in one another, and when we speak to our wounds and our hopes and our possibilities and our real opportunities. Safe home. Thank you very much. We'll see you throughout the year online and in your communities, and we'll see you next year here. Thank you very much.